The main evening news before that with Justin Webb.
Tony Blair has given his backing to the cabinet minister whose son is accused of selling cannabis. Mr. Blair said there was no question of the minister having to resign. $10 billion more to bail out the crippled economy of South Korea. And Christmas gales sweep the country. Thousands of homes are without power. Good evening. Tony Blair has given his full backing to a cabinet minister whose son has been arrested on suspicion of supplying cannabis. The teenager, who can't be identified for legal reasons, was taken to a police station by one of his parents. Downing Street says there's no question of the minister having to resign. Our political correspondent Carolyn Quinn reports.
Scotland Yard aren't releasing the names of those involved, but they have confirmed that on Monday a juvenile went to a police station in London, was arrested in connection with supplying a small quantity of cannabis and was released on police bail. The Mirror newspaper claimed the juvenile was a cabinet minister's son who sold cannabis to journalists in a London pub. The minister, it's understood, decided to take the boy to the police after being informed. While it's being made clear that the Prime Minister supports his minister's actions fully, having spoken to his cabinet colleague by phone on Monday, today's revelations are unwelcome to a government that's maintained a particularly tough stance against drugs. The Home Secretary expressed his view unequivocally at last autumn's party conference.
We will not decriminalise, legalise or legitimise the use of drugs. Drugs wreck lives. Drugs traumatise families. They loosen the foundations of once stable communities, and all of us have to pay for it.
Part of the government's tough regime has included the appointment of West Yorkshire's Chief Constable Keith Halliwell as a so-called drug czar to coordinate the battle against drug use across the country. Some surveys claim that at least half of all young people in their early 20s have tried illegal drugs, despite penalties of up to 14 years in jail. One Labour backbencher, a long-term advocate for the legalisation of cannabis, said he hoped today's story surrounding the minister's son would move the debate on the subject to a new level.
If this story is true, it might bring the Labour cabinet to its senses, and they must stop behaving as though cannabis use is confined to a small group of criminals.
The Prime Minister's official spokesman insisted that the question didn't arise of Tony Blair having anything less than total confidence in his minister. Resignation was not an issue. Once again, it seems the Prime Minister is determined to spell out clearly who's boss, despite the fact that that might prove unpopular with some inside and outside his party. Carolyn Quinn, BBC News.
An extra $10 billion is being rushed to South Korea to try to rescue its collapsing economy. The money is being lent by the world's richest countries and the International Monetary Fund. Britain's contribution to the loan was agreed at a special meeting this morning between the Chancellor and the Governor of the Bank of England.
The South Korean stock market closed today with no respite in sight. The biggest one-day fall in share prices yesterday was followed by a further fall of 4%. Nobody knew how much further it would go. This afternoon, the IMF stepped in again to try to settle the situation. In Korea, the finance minister said more international money would be poured in. The IMF and the big industrial countries would supply another $10 billion on top of the $57 billion already promised, and money would go to South Korea earlier than originally intended. Part of the deal was worked out at the Treasury in London this morning, after the Chancellor met the Governor of the Bank of England, both aware that a Korean collapse threatens Britain through Korean investment and British trade. Britain will put up $400 million. In the City of London, the people who assess financial risk for the world's big institutions had already marked South Korea down as riskier. This afternoon's intervention impressed them.
Policymakers are beginning to get a grip on the extent of the crisis, and I think this ought to be a signal that the worst may begin to be past. But I think there are going to be some nerve-wracking and nail-biting moments still to come before the Korean crisis is finally over.
Most of the world's finance centres now have the seasonal break to assess the new situation. If they return unconvinced, the risk of financial collapse hurting jobs in Britain will be stronger. Not having done enough before, this pouring in of new money by the authorities must beg the question of whether it's enough to stop this crisis in Southeast Asia overflowing to affect real people and real companies around the globe. Stephen Evans, BBC News, the City of London.
4 people have been killed as the worst storms of the winter swept across Britain and Ireland. Thousands of homes in Wales are without electricity, and RAF helicopters are scouring the Irish Sea after a French fishing trawler sent out a distress signal.
As gales wreaked havoc on the roads, bringing down trees and power lines, Irish police dealt with numerous accidents. In some parts of Southern Ireland, winds were reported as reaching 100 miles per hour. In Kerry, gusting winds caused a wall to collapse, killing a 19-year-old man. While thousands of homes were blacked out because of power failure, flights from Shannon Airport had to be delayed until electricity supplies were restored, leaving some passengers wondering where they'd be spending Christmas. In North Wales, emergency services were also inundated with calls from people reporting widespread storm damage, everything from fallen trees to flying masonry, conditions which took many by surprise.
I don't think anybody expected this kind of storm. And it's also unfortunate that it's Christmas Eve as well. People should be enjoying themselves with their families. However, we've got to get on with it.
As the emergency services prepared for a night of chaos, 3 more deaths were reported in Britain. A motorcyclist was killed in North Wales and 2 people died in separate road accidents in the Merseyside area. According to the Weather Centre, conditions are likely to deteriorate before they improve. John McIntyre, BBC News.
Police searching for the mother of an abandoned baby boy have received dozens of calls from the public offering presents and help. A woman left the baby at Plymouth Civic Centre yesterday, saying she couldn't cope anymore. The baby, who's about 4 months old, has been named Noel by police. Stephen Cape reports from Plymouth.
It's more than 24 hours since baby Noel was abandoned by the woman believed to be his mother. Today, he was once again in the public eye because the police admit they're now running out of leads. Despite extensive inquiries, she has not been traced.
She should have no fear of contacting the police at all. I must make that clear. Our main interest is in reuniting her with the baby and that they have a happy Christmas, really.
The police are anxious for people to study the patchwork quilt the baby was wrapped in and the clothes he was wearing. The information may jog a few memories. A neighbour, a friend or even a relative of the woman may recognise the items. The baby was left at this benefits office in Plymouth yesterday morning. The woman walked in and told staff she couldn't cope. She ran out and disappeared into the crowd of shoppers. The police are now checking closed-circuit TV. Baby Noel is now in the care of this foster family who can't be identified. Social services say he's been well looked after by his mother.
Well, I understand that he sleeps very well and eats quite normally and has been medically examined and is fit and healthy.
Presents have been donated and there have been offers of money and accommodation to help the mother. Despite this ordeal, Baby Noel, as he's been nicknamed by the police, is likely to have a more peaceful Christmas Day. Stephen Cape, BBC News, Plymouth.
The terrorist known as Carlos the Jackal is to appeal against his life sentence. Ilich Ramirez Sanchez was jailed last night after being found guilty by a court in France of murdering 2 French secret agents and an informer in 1975. Our Paris correspondent Hugh Schofield reports.
In the early hours of this morning, Ilich Ramirez Sanchez, convicted murderer, was driven off to resume life in jail. It was the end of a mammoth last day in court and of a 10-day trial that allowed a first glimpse at this once almost legendary figure. The verdict, though, when it came, was not a surprise. The families of the 2 policemen he killed were quick to express their pleasure at the verdict and the sentence. Their lawyers said it was a moment they'd been waiting more than 20 years for.
It was a very long time, a very hard time for them. During a long time they was disappointed, they was angry because they can't believe that the killer of the father of the husband could escape to the justice. And tonight they feel better because justice was done.
Earlier in the day, Carlos had held forth for 4 hours in his by now customary, rambling and often barely intelligible fashion. Amid reminiscences of his youth in London and digressions on Palestinian history, he appeared to be arguing that he'd been framed. But the jury found the evidence linking him to the murders at this flat in central Paris too compelling. There were fingerprints and depositions dating from the time from eyewitnesses.
Carlos saw this trial as an opportunity to parade his talents to the world. In the end, though, he came across as a pathetically self-centered figure, totally out of touch with a changed world. With luck, it's with this image, rather than with that of the mythological super-terrorist, that from now on he'll be remembered. Hugh Schofield, BBC News, Paris.
A British sea captain has arrived back home after a mutiny on his cargo ship. Ian Wilkinson from Lancashire took command of the vessel, the Blue Breeze, in Nigeria, and told the mainly Syrian crew to sail to Gibraltar, but they refused and headed for Syria. The captain, who was rescued by Cypriot police, said he was relieved that it was all over.
I'm jolly glad to be back home and looking forward to Christmas, obviously. Glad it's over.
The film director Woody Allen has married Sunyi Previn, the adopted daughter of his former partner Mia Farrow. Allen, who's 62, and his bride, who's 27, held a quiet ceremony at Venice Town Hall yesterday. They're honeymooning in Paris. The disclosure of the affair led to a legal battle between Allen and Mia Farrow, in which Allen had to defend himself against allegations of child abuse. Now, if you left your Christmas shopping until the last minute, it seems you were not alone. Shopkeepers say there was a rush today after weeks of relatively poor sales, and record numbers joined the traditional rush to get away to Christmas destinations at home and abroad. Duncan Kennedy reports.
With no shopping days left to Christmas, the final assault on stores has been going on across Britain. On London's Oxford Street, few seem bothered by the strong winds and driving rains.
Could be cheaper, I bought some bargains. What more do you want?
It's going quite well, really. I'm getting some good bargains.
This is the first time abroad and we're all from Finland and it's raining.
Only those directing the last-minute Yuletide traffic wanted it all to end.
Terrible, terrible. Just want to go home and get in bed.
In Newcastle, the strains of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer accompanied shoppers on their final fling in the city's stores. Whilst in Edinburgh's Gyle shopping centre, staff estimated that around 80,000 people would pass through their doors, helping to boost business after earlier fears of disappointing sales.
It's been a little bit slow to start, but since Monday we've had a bumper trade on Monday, Tuesday and today we're extremely busy, as you can see.
For others unable to face the gloom, foreign destinations are top of the shopping list. Gatwick is expecting a 30% increase in passenger numbers compared with last year.
It just happens that I got invited to Florida, so sunshine, here I come.
At Manchester Airport, it's not just passenger numbers causing staff a problem. Luggage containing Christmas puddings are causing havoc, with security scanners unable to tell them apart from explosives. Despite the strong winds tonight in many parts of the country, motoring organisations say most travellers got away early and avoided delays.
An awful lot of people on the move on all the main routes, but mostly they have moved. Christmas Day, expect that to be very quiet. Boxing Day, the main problem really will be shopping traffic.
With about an hour to go before Christmas Day, most people have now reached their holiday destinations. The majority of traffic out tonight is for people heading to carol services. The next big rush for travellers and shoppers is expected on Boxing Day. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News in London.
And that is it from the BBC Newsroom tonight. From all of us here, have a very good Christmas. Good night.
Hello there. It's been a pretty rotten start to the Christmas holiday for some. The strong winds still causing problems across central parts of Britain. The northern half of England and Wales, along with southern Scotland and Northern Ireland, still suffering from damaging gusts of 60 to 80 miles an hour. But those winds should be moderating during the early hours of Christmas morning, and you can see that happening there on the wind arrow sequence. But notice those strong winds coming across England and Wales during Christmas Day. Another problem, as you can see here, the strong winds in the north disappear, but then we get these strong winds coming in from the southwest, and that's all down not to this low pressure area which brought the problems on Christmas Eve, but this one here which is developing and racing in towards us, and that's where we think it's going to be on Christmas Day. And you'll notice that most of the isobars are packed and heading towards the southern half of Britain. So that's where we think there'll be more stormy weather during Christmas Day across southern parts of Britain, but we will be keeping you updated on television, radio, and also you can take a look at CFAX page 418. Well, one area of low pressure moving away now, those winds beginning to ease down over Northern Ireland, southern Scotland and northern England, but by morning the winds picking up once again across the southwest approaches up to gale force as that new low pressure moves in. A relatively mild night apart from a few icy patches up over the higher parts of Scotland, and then tomorrow more wet and windy weather coming in across England and Wales, spilling northwards up into Scotland during Christmas afternoon, by which time some very windy conditions will be pushing some blustery showers across England and Wales, but again relatively mild for the time of year. Little change in wind direction as we go into Boxing Day, more of a west to northwester, and that means we're going to see slightly colder conditions and also blustery showers, and a lot of them across the western side of the British Isles. That's your Christmas weather. Enjoy it. Merry Christmas.